Thank you for joining. My name is Hiten Chajid. I'm an energy and decarbonization project manager at Baumann Consulting. I'm very excited to be joining alongside Building Innovations Hub and Empower Maryland. Today, we'll be speaking about Maryland BEPS or Building Energy Performance Standards and how incentives can play a role to achieve your standards in the short term and the long term. Next slide, please. All right, let's go over the quick agenda for today. We have a very informative session for you ahead. We'll begin with a quick review of Maryland benchmarking and building energy performance standards. We will speak about what the associated alternative compliance fees are for not meeting the standards and how can incentives help building owners to achieve those standards or to meet those targets. We'll do a deep dive into Empower Maryland Energy Incentive Programs, talk about the type of programs, the details and how to access those incentives. We will also talk about the benefits of participation. We'll share a real world success story. We have a special guest today with us who will share his testimonials and experience on working with Empower Maryland on these incentive programs. Finally, we'll talk about how to access incentives for building owners and ending with some key takeaways and resources. We do have some time left at the end for Q&A, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put that in the chat and we'll answer those questions at the end. Also, if you could just put your name and email address in the chat, that'd be great, just to introduce yourselves. And as a heads up, there we have two very simple and easy polls during the presentation, so look out for those. Next slide, please. Let's go over our panel for today. We have Mary Thomas with us from the Building Innovations Hub, myself from Baumann Consulting. We have Lauren and Nick from Empower Maryland, and Peter from Sodexo, who will be sharing his testimonial experience and a real world case study. Next slide, please. With that, I will hand over the mic to Mary. Mary, the floor is yours.
Guess I should come off of mute. All right, thank you, Hiten. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Thomas. I'm the director of the Building Innovation Hub, which is a project of the national nonprofit, the Institute for Market Transformation, or IMT. And the Building Innovation Hub helps stakeholders in DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia, really anyone in the life cycle of a building, with resources, information, and vital connections necessary to create and operate high-performance buildings. And some of you may have attended our Maryland Benchmarking office hours last summer or our presentation with the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub last fall. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about benchmarking and BEPS in Maryland. But first, we wanted to launch a poll to see how familiar people are with benchmarking. We'll leave it up while I get started, and so please drop your answers in the poll. So next slide, please. So starting with the basics and what is driving these new regulations in Maryland and why are they important and beneficial, we're going to start with benchmarking. Benchmarking allows you to measure what energy and resources your building uses and the emissions your building creates, with the ultimate goal of reducing energy usage, saving operational costs in the long run. For example, benchmarking alone can result in 2 to 3% savings in energy usage annually. So it also helps building decision makers track year-over-year changes in performance, which can help identify any potential operational or maintenance issues that need to be addressed. Because as the saying goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. Benchmarking is new to Maryland. It was first required last year. And the deadline for this year is next week on June 30th. So this is very timely. It'll be required annually on June 1st moving forward. Next slide, please. And I think we can close the poll as well. Thank you. So this year, benchmarking data needs to be third-party verified. This is the first year for the state of Maryland, due with the benchmarking report next Tuesday. And third-party verification is a requirement that's intended to ensure accuracy of the data. We've seen that here in DC where, lessons learned from a location that's been benchmarking for over 10 years, that even with that experience, when DC did third-party verification, 25% of buildings requested energy performance data updates. And I also want to underscore that of that, gross floor area was a really big ticket item that folks updated. So please pay attention to that. The hub has resources on third-party verification. We have an FAQ, a downloadable scope of work, and a vendor matchmaking program to support those who haven't submitted yet. Next slide, please. Next slide. So it's always helpful to think about how all these things tie together. And benchmarking is the first key step towards improving building performance, which is the ultimate goal of building energy performance standards, or BEPS. Next slide, please. And so we'll start off with, what is a building performance standard? It's a mandatory outcome-based policy that sets specific deadlines for existing buildings to achieve quantified standards of whole building actual performance across various metrics, such as energy use and greenhouse gas emissions here in Maryland. The standards become more ambitious over time, driving continuous long-term improvement in the building stock where we all live, work, and play. And incentive programs like Empower Maryland's, which we'll hear about later, enable thousands of buildings to improve performance in measurable ways. So looking at the BEPS here in Maryland, we started with benchmarking last year, and then buildings will have to make improvements to meet performance standards starting in 2030. And those standards are based on net direct greenhouse gas emissions, as well as energy efficiency standards based on energy use intensity, or EUI, intended to be adopted next year. So the next slide will show how this demonstrates how buildings should improve over time. Maryland's BEPS is based on building-specific trajectories moving towards final targets by building type. Different building performance standards around the country have different methods and modes for meeting them. In Maryland, it's this trajectory approach. And this is actually recommended in IMT's model law because clear trajectories provide greater certainty, allow for customization and flexibility, and support capital planning cycles, including incorporating incentive programs like Empower Maryland. So an example for a building, building A could be that they started with a retuning project, and by the end of the cycle, they made that more expensive equipment replacement once it reached the end of its useful life. So moving on to the next slide, this will show kind of illustrate a snapshot of the benefits of BEPS overall. You'll hear more from Hiten and Lauren taking a deep dive in the benefits of the incentive programs in particular. So next slide, please. And in Maryland, most buildings over 35,000 square feet are covered. And even buildings eligible for exemption will need to take action if they haven't done so already. A number of buildings have in the last cycle, but there's still more buildings that can take action if they are exempt. So, and you may recognize this postcard in the slide from last year notifying folks of the benchmarking requirement. So Maryland's MDE's website has a lot of resources and information on where you can find all this information. So moving on to my last slide, here is a timeline that shows how this all fits together. We're benchmarking now. We'll start meeting the standards in 2030 and work towards final standards by 2040 with third-party verification every 5 years. The key here is that it's not one and done. It's an ongoing process to continuously improve performance over time. And incentive programs can really help. And I'll turn this over to Hiten to talk further about the financial benefits. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everyone again. I'm Hiten, Energy and Decarb Project Manager at Baumann Consulting. We are a transatlantic consulting firm headquartered in DC. We also have offices in Chicago and Frankfurt, Germany. We work with the real estate industry and different building types. We work with existing buildings, new constructions. We work on certifications like LEED, WELL-AP, etc., and building enclosure. We are also an approved service provider with most major utilities across the country, including Pepco, BG, and Delmarva. Next slide, please. All right. I'll be speaking about Maryland BEPS alternative compliance fees and how can incentives help in reducing those compliance penalties and achieving short-term and long-term compliance. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now that we've covered the basics of Maryland BEPS, the next question is, what if a building does not meet the applicable standards? So starting 2030, every covered building in Maryland will either have to meet the applicable standards or pay an alternative compliance fee. In 2030, it's starting 2030, it's per metric ton of excess CO2, and it starts at $230 and it increases by $4 every year. Similar to the alternative compliance fees, the standards also get progressively stricter, eventually requiring all covered buildings to be net zero direct emissions, to have net zero direct emissions starting 2040. So if you see on the screen, there are two different property types. So if you have a multifamily housing or if you own a hotel, there's a retail, if you have an office, each building type will have the same final standards, which is zero net direct emissions. Or no fossil fuels burnt on site, basically. But the interim standards, the starting point could be different depending on your property type. So, for example, for a hotel, the interim standard between 2030 and 2034 is 1.47 kilograms of CO2 per square feet, which is different than multifamily. And the interim standard 2, which runs from 2035 to 2039, is essentially the halfway point between your first standards and the final standard, which is zero. To put this in perspective, there's an example about a 200,000 square feet hotel in Maryland, which has a direct GHG intensity of 1.54, sits just above the first interim standard. And if that hotel were to maintain that level of performance in the performance period, which is 2030 to 2040, they would owe an alternative compliance fee of just over $300,000, which is significant. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. I'm sure most of you and all of you and most building owners in Maryland understand and recognize the need to improve energy performance, but funding those improvements can be challenging. That's where incentives play a big role. They can help you lower the upfront costs. So the rebates offered from the utility, they can offset the capital and improve the payback and reduce your ROI. And it can also free some budget or capital for deeper retrofit to meet the future compliance standards. It reduces your net direct emissions, which in turn reduces your compliance fees. And typically with building tune-ups, in our experience, we've seen that the savings range anywhere between 5 and 20%, depending on where you start. Next slide, please. All right. Using the same example as I presented previously, there's a 200,000 square feet hotel in Maryland. This is what the roadmap will look like towards compliance going through the utility incentive program. Step 1 is to benchmark it in Portfolio Manager. They've observed that their net direct emissions, if you remember, it was 1.54, which sits just above the interim standard 1 threshold. They engage with the utility and get approved for the incentive program. They start picking measures, they identify measures through the program, and they implement some of the low cost, no cost measures. And conservatively, we've assumed 5% savings for natural gas and electricity. Again, the savings can go as high as 20%, but we want to be conservative. We've assumed 5%. Next step is after implementation, the utility pays per kilowatt hour and therm saved. It's capped at a certain amount, and we'll do a deep dive into that in the later slides. The final result, the reduction in gas prevents BEPS non-compliance penalties, and the incentives offered by the utility shorten the payback, freeing the funds for capital retrofits in the future. Next slide, please. All right, let's look at some numbers using the same example. On the left, you'll see the business as usual. So the base case, you see it's a 210,000 square feet hotel, uses certain amount of gas and electricity. The direct emission intensity is 1.54, which is again just above the first interim target. On the right, you'll see what they've done to reduce their emissions. They've implemented certain building tune-up measures. It's reset, scheduling, various optimizations. Since they've identified most low cost, no cost measures, the project cost is about $50,000, which includes the consulting fees, the service provider fees, the implementation fees. Conservatively, they've reduced their consumption by 5%. And what that means for them is that their net direct emissions now has fallen from 1.54 to 1.46, which sits just below the first interim standard, which means that they now meet the first interim standard. So they're good until 2034, of course, assuming that they maintain that level of performance. Next slide, please. One more. Thank you. Now, let's say the building owner decides to implement those measures without going through the incentive program. They still see the utility cost savings. They still see the BEPS avoided fees because they do reduce their direct emissions. Their ROI is about 12 months based on the project cost, and their savings is just above $1,500. But what if they do go through the incentive program? Next. You can see that the ROI now falls down to 6 months. It cuts in half. Their savings go from 1,500 to almost $45,000, and incentives here play a big role. Can you next? So what's the impact of going through that program? While it shortens your ROI, it also gives you some additional funds for you to be able to invest in the future to meet interim standards 2 and the final standards. Next slide. Okay, so we've created a calculator in-house for properties in Maryland to calculate the cash flow through these building tune-up programs and measures implemented. You'll see 3 lines on the graph. There's the first case is business as usual. So if they continue maintaining or running the property as is, the second is with minimum savings. We've assumed it to be 5%. The third is with maximum savings, which is 12%, can go again as high as 20-25% sometimes. But even in the worst case scenario, they end up saving $300,000 in today's money in cumulative savings between 2030 and 2034. So the conclusion is that you start with operational quick wins, you implement those low cost, no cost measures, and then reinvest in capital upgrades to meet future compliance standards. Next slide, please. Emissions compliance alone can save you about 65 cents per square feet. That's the average cost per square feet between 2025 and 2050. But if you pair it with energy efficiency, the savings can go as high as $4.5 per square feet. So the objective is not only to meet the compliance, the objective is to improve building performance while reducing your ROI, and incentive programs can really help you with that. The state of Maryland projects that the statewide energy cost savings between 2025 and 2050 would be about $22.3 billion through the BEPS initiative. Next slide, please. Putting all of that together, utility funded improvements become a very practical first step towards your compliance. So this is how the roadmap will look like. You start with building tune-ups, low cost, low risk measures through the utility funded programs. Your energy drops typically 5 to 20%. That frees up money for capital upgrades. Your direct emissions fall, moving you towards your short-term BEPS compliance, and using the money that's now freed up through the incentive program, you meet the final standard, avoid the compliance fee, all while maintaining your ROI. A quick note, all of you must already be benchmarking your properties in Energy Star Portfolio Manager annually, but it's also a great tool to measure the progress of your building on year on year. Next slide. With that, I will hand it over to Lauren, who will speak about the incentive programs. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think we're launching a poll right before this section. Yes, all right. So that should be coming up for you just shortly. Question is, have you used utility incentives or energy efficiency programs in the past? Answers are yes, no, but I'm interested, or I'm not sure what incentives are available. Well, if you're in that third option, we definitely have the webinar for you today. We're really excited as Empower Maryland to be on this webinar. So thanks so much to the Maryland Building Innovation Hub and also to Baumann for putting this together. We'll go to the next slide and get started with our section. So first of all, we have to discuss what is an incentive program. Well, if you take a look at your bill, there should be a small line on the end that says something related to Empower. And that's exactly what it is. It's a small surcharge on your monthly bill. And the goal of this fund is to assist Maryland businesses, households, and facilities save money and energy. This was all beginning with the Empower Maryland Efficiency Act of 2008. So this has been going on for quite some time. And not only do we have rebates for efficient appliances, energy audits, but also for energy saving incentive programs and more. So the little graphic at the bottom refers to all of the following investor-owned utilities that pay into the Empower Fund. So there are quite a few of them. So we'll go to the next slide, please. All right. So this is just a quick look back of where we came and kind of where we're going. So again, in 2008, the first Empower Maryland Act was passed by the Maryland legislature. 2015, we met a 15% reduction goal. Up to 2025, this was the first year of the state BEPS reporting deadline. And in 2026, we are happy to report that we have established another 3 years for Empower Maryland funding. We don't fully know yet what 2027's programs are going to look like, so stay tuned. We're working hard to get that information to you, but they do have the rest of this year, the Maryland legislature, to determine what those final orders will look like. So we can't go to the next slide without noting that congratulations to our service providers like Baumann. You really helped save a lot of energy. And again, the incentive programs, there are quite a few of them. You'll see on the middle left here, we're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about building tune-up this afternoon. But we do have quite a few programs, including new construction, combined heat and power. So just keep that in mind as well. If you want to go to our next slide, please. All right. And again, the various utilities that offer Empower Maryland incentives, we're going to be talking specifically about BGE, Delmarva Power, and Pepco today, but there are incentives that are available through SMECO, Washington Gas, and Potomac Edison. They have their own individual programs that are not part of Empower, but we have various portfolios: instant discount, building tune-up, small business solutions. So all commercial, industrial, government, and institutional and nonprofit electric service members in the above service territories are eligible to receive incentives regardless of their electricity supplier if you pay into that Empower Maryland Fund. Next slide, please. So you might be asking yourself, why isn't there one unique approach across Maryland? Well, although we strive for consistency across programs, there are various differences in terms of geographic locations, budget allocations, and also kilowatt hour savings goals. So across BGE, Delmarva Power, Pepco, and SMECO, we try to have as much similarity as possible, but there are some differences. So please keep that in mind. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to talk specifically about what incentives are available. So we have to start with, why would somebody do a building tune-up? Well, if you have a building that you notice that you're starting to have some operational problems, your clients or customers are indicating that they might be too hot, too cold, that is the purpose of a building tune-up. We want to optimize the energy use in that building. We want to improve comfort for those customers, and we also want to resolve operational problems. Next slide, please. So getting more in depth into the different types of building tune-up. So we have to think of building tune-up as an umbrella, and we're going to talk about the various pieces underneath the umbrella. What I like to call the low-hanging fruit of building tune-ups is the HVAC tune-up incentive. This is a very cut and dried process. Units are eligible every 3 years for this program. They must be DX, direct expansion. Unfortunately, water coils are ineligible for incentives for this program cycle's funding. But really, what this is going to include is an online application. You're going to clean evaporative and condenser coils using industry-approved methods and cleaners. You're going to change those air filters or clean reusable air filters. And then the most important point, photo documentation before and after. The incentives are paid out per tonnage. You can see at the top left here what that payout is. This is also something where you might choose to partner with an individual within the industry to do that, or you can also, if you have facilities and maintenance individuals, you can train them to do this process as well. If we're deep diving even further into the building tune-up program, here are a list of common measures. So you might be looking at, in terms of space and water heating, adjusting that discharge air temperature, reducing steam leaks. If you're thinking about space cooling, you want to adjust the chilled water supply temperatures, eliminate that simultaneous heating and cooling. Or if you're talking about control systems, you might want to modify your time clock or EMS scheduling. Keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list. The beauty of the building tune-up program is that service providers like Baumann can choose to be creative or look at what the building is going to necessitate. And they can do various EEMs that are not on this list. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to talk about the difference between small building tune-up, large building tune-up, and monitoring-based tune-up or monitoring-based commissioning. Yeah. So the small building tune-up, this is ideal for the smaller facilities. They might have smaller budget. And like Hidden was talking about, they want to implement those low or no cost EEMs or energy efficiency measures. What are the criteria? Well, the building has to be less than 75,000 square feet. It's at least 2 years old. And of course, the facility owner, you have to express a commitment to be actively involved in this process. So again, project goals, we want to reduce energy and demand costs. We want to reduce premature equipment failure. Really, this the difference between small and large building tune-up, which we'll talk about in the next slide, is really square footage. The zeitgeist of this program is we want to improve occupant comfort. We want to improve the energy efficiency in these buildings. If we're talking about BGE territory, here's the incentive structure. It's either the lesser of 30 cents per kilowatt hour saved, up to 85% of the total project cost with the cap of $30,000. And in Pepco and Delmarva Power, it's the lesser of 25 cents per kilowatt hour, with the addition of $3 per therm saved, with the cap of 85% of the total project cost. Dollar cap is $200,000. So you can see how those incentives are somewhat similar, but they're a little bit different, which is what I was referring to earlier. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk about the difference between small and large. Really, the big difference here is square footage. It has to be equal to or greater than 75,000 square feet. The payout for this is the lesser for BGE, the lesser of 30 cents per kilowatt hour saved, up to 85% of the total project cost with a cap of $100,000. For Pepco and Delmarva Power, that's again 25 cents, 85% of the project cost, but this time the cap is $200,000, $300,000 for a campus. And here, a campus just refers to a series of interconnected buildings. It doesn't have to refer to a school campus. Next slide, please. All right, big difference between a small and large building tune-up and monitoring-based incentives is the time. This is going to require an 18-month contract for monitoring services because we're investing, or the customer is investing, in an ongoing process of resolving operational problems, improving comfort, and optimizing energy use. Because this is quite a long process, we offer the payment in 2 phases. That initial payment is 25% of the initial contract cost. That's for both BGE and Pepco. Pepco has the addition of 4 cents per conditioned square foot, with the max cap for BGE being $15,000 and $8,000 plus the conditioned square foot, 4 cents for that, for Pepco and Delmarva Power. So you're going to complete your energy modeling. You're going to implement your EMs. You're going to monitor the energy in the building on an ongoing basis. And then the second payment happens after you've been able to provide documentation that your interventions were fruitful. So that second payment for BGE is going to be the cap of 20 cents per kilowatt hour saved annually with a cap of $100,000, or for Pepco and Delmarva Power, 22 cents per kilowatt hour saved annually with the addition of $3 per therm. And again, the max cap is $200,000 or $300,000 for a campus. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the benefits of participating. If we go to the next slide, I have a graphic here that indicates that, of course, we want to reduce the operations cost of a building. Of course, we want to reduce the maintenance cost. But again, if you participate in a building tune-up project, you're going to improve the building aesthetics. You're going to have reduced energy cost. There's going to be a better return on investment. You're going to improve, again, that occupant comfort. And the most important thing for the Empower Maryland programs is that we want to help you contribute to corporate sustainability goals. Next slide, please. So again, the Empower Maryland benefits are not only for your energy bill. You're going to, of course, reduce energy consumed, which is going to decrease your energy bill, which would hopefully save you money, and you're going to gain incentives from that. But we also want to emphasize that we want to decrease the carbon footprint and help the environment. So we have this nice cycle here to kind of demonstrate how all of these things are influencing each other. So if we go to the next slide, please. Next, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Nick DeFada. We are, again, very excited. We have a guest speaker today and a case study where we're going to show you in vivo. This is a case that actually happened in the Empower Maryland territory. And Pete is going to talk about his experience participating in the Empower Maryland program. So Nick and Pete, you gentlemen have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick DeFada. I'm an account executive with Pepco and Delmarva Power for the Power Maryland program. Excuse me. I work with multifamily and commercial real estate sector. One property we assisted in. Actually, next slide, please. One property we assisted in the program was the Asbury Methodist Village. We assisted with the upgrade of the water-cooled chillers. This gave significant improvement for the tenants and greatly reduced the energy consumption. The incentive was given was $140,705 with an annual electric savings of $65,287. Peter and his team did a great work with us, and we want to give you his firsthand experience of how he did a great job with the programs. So next slide, and pass it off to you, Pete.
Appreciate it, Nick. So a little bit about me. I'm an energy manager for 6 senior living facilities across Maryland and PA. And as an energy manager, it's my job to evaluate and implement energy saving projects. And these incentives and rebates are really a big part of that. So Nick did a great job talking about our project where we upgraded our central plant that included a new chiller, new high efficient boilers. So, and the rebates that kind of came along with that. So, really this project for us was a total win-win. We got new equipment, we lowered our bills, the residents were more comfortable. We see benefits through the environment, all the stuff that we talked about in this webinar earlier. We really got to reap a lot of these rewards. And from my perspective, I just wanted to talk about how important these incentives are to people in my position, like energy managers, facilities directors, because it really, and I know Hinton touched on this earlier too, but it really does help us get these projects done because it lowers the ROI. And, part of my job too is really selling these projects to my clients. So if I can tell them that the ROI went down from 4 years to 2 years, I mean, that project kind of sells itself at that point. So, really everybody wins out of that. So, and, and lastly, I just wanted to talk about, my personal experience. Working with the whole team has been awesome. I know looking at a lot of these slides, and when I first started doing this kind of work, it's kind of overwhelming. You have the application process and the different programs. I know that the team tries to make it as simple as possible, but if this is new to some of you out there, just know that there's a whole team supporting this, and they really help me out personally. Whether that's the application process, all the stuff needed for that. They'll help guide you through that, and finding which program to actually apply for. They'll help you with that too. So I can't say it enough about the team and how easy they make the process on me, so I can kind of focus on the high level job at hand. So yeah, I appreciate the time and appreciate you having me today.
All right. I think I have a couple more slides left, but first I want to give a big thank you to Pete for, excuse me, giving us a review of your experience. So at this point in the webinar, you should be champing at the bit saying, all right, how do I access some of these incentives? Excuse me, next slide, please. So important thing to note is that if you are a service provider, we call them service provider or contractor that's on this webinar, you will need to apply to become a service provider within our program. That does a couple of things. It's, of course, a vetting process to make sure that, of course, you have the necessary documentation to apply for these programs, but the side effect is that it also gives you a lot of publicity. You're going to be a listed service provider. You'll be searchable on our website. So here's the main page, a couple links to those listing all applications, and then a link to the service provider application. Next slide, please. So this is what the landing page looks like. You'll have a list of all of the different programs. You'll see in the middle there, we have a link to our building tune-up programs. If you'd like to apply, you'll just click there. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see what the Pepco site looks like. So they're very similar with a few differences. Okay, so the screenshot shows the home page. You want to click the link for your desired application type. If you need to log into your dashboard, you're just going to click Manage Online Applications. If you go to the next slide, please. So as you are beginning this process, keep in mind that a building tune-up project, this is specifically for contractors or service providers, but also if you are a customer and are on this call, you're going to be subject to an energy audit that's going to produce your audit report with your recommended EM list and estimated savings. You're going to go through a process of maintenance, repair, optimization work, just like Hinton was showing in his demonstration. We're going to remeasure and verify data where needed, and then it should produce a final report, which your service provider will submit to the program upon your behalf. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the process. So won't talk too much about this slide, but basically, we go through a process once your application is received of scope discovery. We're going to have a technical review. You should receive pre-approval for your project. At that point, you'll go into the installation or maintenance phase. And then at that point, we will receive closeout documents from you, final approval, and then your check should be in the mail, hopefully, after that point. Next slide, please. So we always want to make a final caveat of documentation. The programs are huge on documentation. So included a slide here about photos needed for final approval. Well, really, before you do any work within the program, we have to emphasize that you must receive pre-approval for work to move forward. But if you're thinking about any compressed air leaks as a part of your project, we want to make sure we have photos of the compressor equipment nameplate, air pressure set point, leak location. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but when your application reviewer is in contact with you, they will be able to give you a better idea of what's needed. Next slide, please. Again, this is an overview because it's a more complicated process than building tune-up of the monitoring phase tune-up process. So this just kind of outlines what the phase one incentive is going to look like with the incentive structure, what the different phases are, and then the phase three or the payout incentive structure. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a great, money shot and overview of all of our building tune-up incentives. So this is something that you would like, if you'd like to bring this to, upper management, if you're a customer on the webinar today, or if you're a service provider, this is a shot to show to your customers of what the incentive structure looks like. Next slide. Okay, so in conclusion, if we go to the next slide, we just want to emphasize before I pass it back to Hiten that there's energy savings for everyone. So we have a lot of individuals from multifamily and property management that I've seen on the call today, but we also, our programs are eligible for warehouses, retail, faith-based institutions. So if you're a service provider, keep that in mind that we aren't necessarily pigeonholed into like a hotel space as an example. In summary, really bring your problems to us. If you have a site, you're not sure what needs to happen there, we're more than willing to work with you and figure out the best program that would be most applicable to that site. Next slide, please. And this is just a summary slide about what Empower Maryland strives to do. Again, at the top, we want to make sure there's a lot of financial savings, but we also are very interested in spurring innovation, having a positive impact on the environment. We create a lot of jobs, as is indicated today. Baumann has done a lot of work in the program, and we hope to be a job creation for local and international companies. Yeah. Next slide. This is an overview of our utility service territories. That's just a slide to keep in mind. And then our Delmarva Power Pepco territory map. You have Nick right there at the bottom. He is our account executive over real estate and multifamily. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Hiten. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much, Mary. We can open up the round for some Q&A. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat. We'll go through it one by one. And just as an FYI, this webinar is recorded, so you will all receive a copy of the recording afterwards.
All right. So I'll MC our Q&A section here, and we have some questions in the Q&A, and then also some of the registrants asked some questions when we registered. So starting off with a question in the Q&A from Adam Landsman. The question was, it would be helpful if you could translate the 240 tons CO2 to therms, cost per therms, because most building owners and operators have a better understanding of therms as opposed to CO2 emissions. So Hiten, I think you might have an answer for this.
Yep. Hey, Adam. No, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. The conversion really depends on how what kind of fuel is being used. But strictly, if I'm talking about natural gas properties that are only burning natural gas on site, the conversion may be around $1.2 to $1.3 per therm. but that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Another question we have is, I think this is a question for Lauren. On average, how long does application pre-approval take?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the answer is going to depend. We prefer to have pre-approval within 3 calendar weeks. That's given that number one, you've had a scoping call with us to discuss your project, and then everything is submitted. We like to say that we reach out to us early and often because that oftentimes will cut down some of that time to application pre-approval. Also keeping in mind that we also have rush times throughout the year, just as you all do at the beginning and the end of the year. It's going to take a little bit longer to get your application pre-approved. But in general, we try to have that done within about 3 calendar weeks.
And another question is, do you have to use an HVAC provider approved by Pepco or BGE?
For our HVAC program, I don't believe that they have to be, if we're talking about HVAC tune-up specifically, I don't believe they have to be an approved service provider, but let me double check on that for you.
Thank you. I'll move on to some more questions. So one question that we received was, how much will the ACP cost building owners in 2027? I think I can answer that. I believe ACP is referring to the alternative compliance payment, which is a part of the BEPS from meeting the BEPS standards. And the answer is in 2027, nothing. The ACP doesn't come into effect until 2030 at the same time that meeting the performance standards, net zero direct emissions, and energy use intensity come into effect. So hopefully that answers that question. There's also a question about the incentives related to just complexity and opacity. And the question is, how can we make incentives more accessible to ratepayers and service providers? Lauren, could you speak to the accessibility of the incentive programs?
Certainly. Could I have that question repeated for me again, please?
Sure. The question is, how can we make incentives more accessible to ratepayers and service providers?
So I think that question is best answered with what we're currently doing and what we're kind of looking to expand to do in 2027, which is the service provider team. Our main goal is really training. So training and outreach. So we host trainings twice a year. I like to call them the spring semester and the fall semester of trainings, where we go through the whole host and list of our trainings. So we deep dive into building tune-up even more so than we did today, HVAC, custom, lighting, all of those. And then in terms of accessibility, we also like to work with the Building Innovation Hub with Mary and her team to talk about what are the various sources of funding. We like to work with the Maryland Department of Energy and the Environment. We invite them to come on our trainings. And then in terms of accessibility for individual customers and service providers, we are constantly seeking feedback from our service providers, from our customers about areas that they would like to have incentives, areas that they feel need to have changes. We always are looking to improve. So the best way is really just to get involved, to attend webinars like you're doing today, to attend our trainings, to kind of get on email lists so that you're the first to know about changes that are coming down the pike. Also, for the individual that asked the question earlier about HVAC, just received word that they must be a registered service provider with a master HVAC license for both prescriptive and HVAC tune-up.
Thank you, Lauren. So we have a couple of questions about specific like building typologies or building use types. But so how do residents and naturally occurring affordable housing participate in multifamily affordable housing programs? And And then there was also a question on what incentives are there for faith groups wanting to upgrade their HVAC systems. And then there's a question about hotels. So we are well represented here across different building typologies. I don't know if Lauren, you could speak to that more specifically, or perhaps the information in the slides already answered that.
Yes, could you repeat the first question again for me?
Yeah, it was just a question on how residents in naturally occurring affordable housing participate in multifamily affordable housing programs. You know, this question may be beyond the scope of Empower Maryland, but if there is something specific about what residents could do with Empower Maryland, that'd be good to touch on.
Yeah, definitely. For apartment buildings, that is a question that I'm probably going to have to talk with them offline about. It's not my specific area of expertise, but I know that there are some incentives that are available. It would be mainly on the kind of the landlord's perspective for that. But definitely, if you'd like to put your information in the chat, I can direct you to the correct information. And then there was a second question, correct, Mary?
Yeah, and there were questions about incentives for faith groups wanting to update their HVAC system, and hotels as well.
Yeah, so faith groups and hotels. So first of all, determine if you are a ratepayer for the Empower Maryland Fund. If you are, then you are eligible for any type of program within the Empower Maryland suite that would be applicable for your specific building. For faith-based institutions, I believe we can definitely look into grants that would be specifically available for faith-based institutions. I don't think that Empower Maryland offers specific incentives for that. But yeah, again, this would definitely feel free to reach out. We'll connect you with the appropriate account manager and talk further about any particular projects here.
Yeah, and I think on that, just more generally, the overall incentives are available for faith-based institutions. So just wanted to highlight that as well. Okay, we have a few more questions. One question is, how might BEPS compliance influence property valuations, lease negotiations, or occupancy rates? I don't know if Hiten wants to take that. I could also field that question.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. Well, I will say that, you know, sometimes we focus so much on like compliance with the regulation, but there's also this outcome, which is that, you know, the building is operating better. You know, the buildings is more comfortable when it's going through BEPS compliance, and all the retuning efforts, the equipment replacements, the different ways that buildings are taking to comply with BEPS. So, you know, there's evidence that a better operating building, you know, sort of using like LEED as an example, they command higher rents, so there's just that side of it where a better building is a more valuable property, and retains more tenants as well. But then there is the compliance factor, which is, you know, a building that is not in compliance. That's something tenants should know about and should be aware of in their lease negotiations. So tenants should be asking about the BEPS status of their building. So, you know, it's not just an issue for owners, it's something that tenants will want to know about as well. So hopefully that helps answer the question. All right, we've just got a couple more minutes and we have a few more questions. One was from a controls contractor. They were asking how a controls contractor could help. Lauren, I'm guessing the answer is apply for your service provider program.
Definitely, yeah. Reach out to me, you can reach out to me first to determine whether or not the program would be a good fit and vice versa. And definitely feel free to reach out to apply directly on our website for a service provider position after that.
Lauren, another question is, what types of projects are you seeing the greatest demand for right now with these incentive programs?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Definitely building energy performance standards. Those are it's driving a lot of building owners to reach out, which is great. Because that means that we're really tapping into a large portion of the energy that's kind of a drain on the system. So again, Empower Maryland, the whole purpose of that is to reduce the load on our electric grid. It's going to be a very hot topic for this summer. So those are the projects that I'm seeing most often. I would say that I'm trying to think of a specific industry, but I really can't think of one. It just kind of is a good indication of the individuals that are on this call today, because everybody's reaching out to discuss incentives. So it's not just one specific industry.
Yeah, it's a hot topic. All right. We have time for just maybe one more question. There's a question that was just what progress is being made with the program? How is it assessed? So assuming that's about Empower Maryland, I don't know if there are any changes you can talk about.
Yeah, so at this point for our 2027 and the 3-year program that will begin in 2027, we don't have the final orders quite yet. And really internally, what we're doing is we assess based on a lot of different factors. This is a 30-minute conversation about how we assess our programs. But really customer satisfaction is one aspect of it. Greenhouse gas emissions, kilowatt hours is another aspect of it. Where we are receiving the most projects is another aspect of it. How many incentive dollars that we've paid into various industries. So we look at all of those factors to determine, and then also kind of future need. So we're really looking at building energy performance standards as another aspect. How specifically for building tune-up, we're definitely looking for contractors and service providers like Baumann that can provide those energy management services.
Okay.
And how we can, didn't finish that thought, how we can essentially prop them up to complete a lot of this work starting in the next cycle.
Okay, great. All right. So I think we did just get one more question. What happened to EUI as an aggregate metric? And I think the answer there is EUI is Maryland's intending to adopt EUI standards. They wanted to base it on the benchmarking data. So we should be seeing that EUI information come out in the next year or so. And then just wrapping up the session here. I want to thank Hiten and Lauren and Nick and Pete for sharing everything. I think this was a lot of really great information about incentives. Here at the Building Innovation Hub, we're always hearing from people wondering about how they can get support for their building performance improvement projects. And there's just a huge range in Maryland through the Empower program about what you can do with your building. So I don't know, Hiten, if you have any final closing words. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. No, this was great. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. They're working with Lauren and this program. There's so many funding opportunities. So please feel free to reach out to anybody on the call. We'll share the slide deck with you. Looking forward to working together. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.